and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Synergies Tier List video. Today our analyst will be ranking each synergy from S to D tier. Keep in mind that set 3 is still quite new for everyone, and these rankings are not set in stone as the meta shifts daily. Let's get into it, starting with the S tier. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Okay, let's jump back into the video with S tier. The synergies in this tier are Mercenary, Rebel, Starship, and Demolitionist. S tier are traits that are dominating the current meta and are often seen in the top 2 compositions at the end of the game. Starting at the top, we have Mercenary. This is basically the tier for Gangplank and Misfortune, as they are dominating the current meta. Both of them are played in a myriad of compositions, though you'll most likely see them thrown into a Rebel composition. Regardless of what build you play these two in, what really makes them shine is the Mercenary trait, as they can get a wide variety of upgrades to their ultimates. Whichever upgrades you do find for either champion, they are always worth investing into. Right below Mercenary is our next synergy, Rebel. Rebels are doing quite well in the meta and are the most common way to get a first place finish. This isn't entirely due to the trait and champions themselves though, as you're almost always going to see Gangplank played with this trait, and he, alongside other legendary champions, definitely skews the win rate a bit. That said, it is still a fantastic trait because of the shielding effect, and you can fully stack one champion with a ton of extra shields. Often this will be on Aurelion Sol, as the longer they survive, the better, since they can clean up the board quite well after all of the AoE ultimates go off. We can't talk about Rebel without also talking about our next synergy, Starship. Aurelion Sol, which is what Starship is, has a lot of similarities to Singed in set 2. They are immune to movement impairing effects and have no basic attacks and just flies around the board, wreaking havoc. The current meta is certainly dominated by 5-cost champions, and while you're likely to see Aurelion Sol played alongside Rebels, they are still plenty strong by themselves in almost any composition in the late game. Our last synergy in S tier is Demolitionist. This trait being S tier is entirely because of Gangplank and the synergy he has with Ziggs in Rebels. Being able to AoE stun is insanely powerful, so these two naturally pair well together. Add on to the fact that you can make any champion into a Demolitionist makes this trait even scarier, as it works well on both Misfortune and Aurelion Sol. Time to move out of S tier and mosey on down to the A tier. This tier consists of Cybernetic, Protector, Blaster, Infiltrator, Brawler, Mystic, MECH-PILOT, and Star Guardian. A-tier synergies do well in the meta and usually make a top 4 consistently. They aren't as dominant as S tier, but they are still a key aspect of the meta currently. At the top of A tier, we have Cybernetic. Cybernetic is quite a strong trait when you're able to find all of the champions, but that is also part of their weakness, as you need all 6 to play this trait effectively. 3 Cybernetics is one of the better opening traits you can play, but if you truly want this synergy to do well, you need to find those late game champions, Aurelia and Echo. Echo, much like other legendary champions, is insanely powerful late game, but requires items to truly shine. Moving on, we've got Protectors. Protectors have started to really show prominence in the meta, but the tricky part of these champions is that you definitely need to 3-star Xin Zhao and Rakan. If you do that, they are great with dealing with other meta traits, and when paired with Mystic, these champions become insanely hard to kill. One of the main issues of Protectors is the lack of strong late game champions, so to shine, they really heavily rely on being 3-starred. Next up, we have Blasters. Blasters are doing well in the meta, with the specific build of Brawler Blaster being the most common, but the champions are flexible enough that you're likely to see 2 Blasters in a lot of different builds. A big reason for this is how strong Misfortune is, so it's easy to slot in a second Blaster to pair with her in the late game. Outside of MF, this trait has a fantastic carry champion, Jinx. Jinx has returned to TFT in set 3 and is poised to be a staple carry once again, just like she was in set 1. Lucian is another unit coming back with similar results from set 1, as he is an essential early and mid-game carry champion. Infiltrators are next on the A tier list. This trait has a few builds that really showcase its potential as the new assassin for set 3, with Mech Infiltrator being the most common. Kai'Sa is a decent carry, and Fizz is necessary for the MECH-PILOT, while Echo, as mentioned previously, is one of the top champions in the game currently. Shaco is what really makes this trait shine, as he does a ton of damage when given AD items like Bloodthirster and Infinity Edge. Look to 3-star Shaco for maximum damage output and watch as he one-shots the enemy champions every single time he casts his ultimate. Onto the lower half of the A tier with Brawler. Brawler is another one of the options for frontline in set 3 and does quite well in that regard. Often seen in a Brawler Blaster composition, it's still viable to run champions outside of that situation, with Vi being necessary in Cybernetic and Cho'Gath having a strong AoE stun ultimate. What really holds Brawlers back is the lack of champion variety this synergy has, as there are only 4 total champions. Next is a classic splash trait from set 2, Mystic. Mystic is in a weird spot for set 3. It feels necessary against all of the magic damage of the current meta, but 2 Mystic isn't powerful enough to make a difference, and 4 Mystic can be hard to fit in properly. But it is still providing a team-wide magic resistance buff, and because of that, it's a must in the current meta, even though it does feel a little bit lackluster. The real saving grace for Mystic is how great Lulu is and how easy it is to slot her in with another Mystic at levels 8 and 9. Nearing the end of A tier, we have MECH-PILOT. MECH-PILOT is a staple part of the meta, as you're likely to see at least one person playing them each game, but it's not overall dominant enough to beat the S tier strategies. As previously mentioned, it's paired with Infiltrator, though it also does well with Sorcerer. Basically, this trait is great if you're looking to get a top 4, but isn't likely to do much better than that unless you're able to get most of your champions to 3 stars. That said, the Super Mech is a beast with defensive items like Warmogs, Dragon's Claw, and Guardian Angel. Our last synergy in A tier is Star Guardian. Much like MECH-PILOT, the synergy is going to mostly be seen in top 4s and not so much in top 2s. It's a bit of an insular trait, as it's going to want to run mostly with itself, and you'll naturally get Sorcerer with it. Because of the lack of flexibility, it is definitely not easy to play every game if anyone else is contesting the champions. That said, when you're able to play it effectively and get Nico, Syndra, and Ahri 3-starred, it can be super effective, especially with Guardian Angel and Ionic Spark on Nico, as she can hard carry fights with her ultimate. That is going to be it for the A tier. Let's move on down to the B tier. This tier consists of Chrono, Darkstar, Sorcerer, Celestial, Vanguard, and Valkyrie. B-tier synergies are secondary traits that you're often going to pair with certain champions, but the traits themselves aren't that strong on their own. First up for B-tier, let's talk about Chrono. Chrono is a great utility trait for the attack speed bonus it provides, but it's more or less a trait you play incidentally and less so something that you're going to focus on. For example, in Blaster Brawler, you're going to have 2 Chrono because of Ezreal and Blitzcrank, which is fantastic for the build, but coincidental because those 2 champions are necessary from the other 2 traits. Chrono is a great trait to pair with a lot of other traits and champions, so don't let this ranking make you shy away from playing it in most of your builds. The next trait on the list, Darkstar, is effective mainly because of the champions and less so because of the trait itself. Yes, there is a build that uses 6 Darkstar to make Shaco or Jhin the carry, and it can do well in the meta, but the trait itself really isn't why the build works. Because of how it currently functions, where the bonus is only transferred to one champion nearby, it often makes the trait overall less effective. It's great when the bonus transfers to your Shaco or Jhin, but oftentimes it's not making much of an impact until the end of the fight. Still, the champions, in particular Shaco, make this trait worthy of B tier, but it definitely needs a bit of balancing to truly shine. Next up is Sorcerer. Sorcerer is generally paired with either Star Guardian or MECH-PILOT and does well in both of those builds, but the main issue with this trait is the lack of impact it has compared with other synergies. It's certainly useful to have increased magic damage for your whole team, but it's only 20% for 2, which makes splashing it not that effective. One of the other reasons why Sorcerer is a bit lacking is the champions are too inflexible. Most of them are Star Guardians, and as such are only going to be played in, well, Star Guardians. Vel'Koz is one of the weakest champions in the game, and Twisted Fate falls off rather quickly. Annie is really the only versatile sorcerer, and even then she's mostly played in MECH-PILOT builds. Overall, this trait would be a lot better if the champions were just a bit more versatile. On the lower half of B tier, we have Celestial. Celestial is super useful to splash in any build because of how strong Lulu is. Outside of Lulu, there's really not a lot of cases that you're going to look to play this trait, though it is useful for any carry champion like Jinx or Kayle. Another situation you're likely to play Celestial in consistently is a Protector composition that uses both Xin Zhao and Rakan. But like most of the traits in B tier, the trait is never truly the star of any build. Coming up next is Vanguard. Vanguard is another frontline option in set 3, and it's in an interesting spot. A lot of the champions are fantastic like Mordekaiser and Jace, but the trait itself isn't super sought after. There is a specific build using Vanguard with Mystic that utilizes Jace and Mordekaiser as the carries, though they need to be 3-starred for it to really be effective. Vanguard is not bad by any means, it just doesn't have as much impact in the meta with so much magic damage, as having increased armor doesn't really matter that much. Our last synergy in B tier is Valkyrie. Valkyrie champions are great with Kale and Misfortune being both really strong late game carry options, but the trait itself is mostly just brought along for the ride and just makes those champions a bit stronger. It doesn't really have that much of an impact anywhere else since it's only 3 champions, and that inflexibility really limits its value, especially as it isn't even necessary a lot of the time. Alright, we're on to the second to last tier, C tier. This tier consists of Blademaster, Sniper, and Space Pirate. C-tier synergies aren't bad or unplayable, but their value is limited, and it's mostly the champions, not the traits, that make them have any value. At the head of C-tier, we have Blademaster. It's an effective trait because of how often you're likely to see it played, but the effect of the trait itself is really not that important. Most of the champions in this trait are great on their own, and they just happen to also be Blademasters like Kale, Aurelia, and Shen. One of the biggest downsides of the synergy is 6 Blademaster is incredibly ineffective, so you're only ever going to be running 3. Next up is Sniper. Sniper is just in an odd spot because Jhin is actually viable in the right circumstance, but the Sniper trait itself really doesn't do too much. It certainly adds value and is totally worth running with Jhin, but because there's only 3 champions, it's not very flexible, and Caitlyn is quite underwhelming past the early stages of the game. If the trait had more champions or more damage on the effect, it would feel much more impactful. Moving on down, we've got Space Pirate. Space Pirate has amazing champions, notably Gangplank, but the trait itself really is only playable in the early game. After that point, it's really not possible to play, especially for Space Pirate, as it needs Gangplank to work, and there's just way better builds out there that utilize Gangplank. Alright, our very last tier is D tier. The 2 traits in this tier are MANA-REAVER and Void. Essentially, they aren't really played much or really even have an impact on the game, though there are champions within these traits that are decent. First up, we have MANA-REAVER. MANA-REAVER has a decent champion in Aurelia, and outside of that, doesn't really have much going for it. While 4 MANA-REAVER has potential to be useful, it's unlikely you're ever going to run 4. Lastly, we have Void. Cho'Gath is a strong champion in Brawlers, and Kha'Zix is decent for infiltrators early on, but this trait is just not worth playing. Especially with Vel'Koz being such a weak champion, there's really no benefit to playing 3 Void. That is going to be it for today's tier list video. We're all excited to continue to learn this set, and as we mentioned in the introduction, keep in mind that these tier lists are going to be constantly changing each and every single day. Let us know in the comment section below what synergies you think will be rising and falling throughout the week. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next Giant Slayer TFT video.